We're wrapping up the regular season, about 10 days away from the play-in tournament. And I want to talk about what we actually learned from the regular season, and just as importantly, what we don't learn from the regular season. We learn about unknowns. Every team, every season has undergone changes of some kind. New players have joined, but also the players themselves. Some have gotten better, some have gotten worse. You've got rookies that have joined. And we're learning where all of these players stand. Unproven players and teams have something to prove during the regular season. But the proven teams don't. They have nothing to gain from the regular season other than maybe finding some holes in their roster that they can address with small moves here and there, some tweaks to their rotation. But they know who they are about a couple months in, and they don't need the regular season to get ready for the playoffs. In fact, I believe that proven teams engage in smokescreens far more than we realize. When I look at the West, I see OKC, Denver, Minnesota. One of those teams is going to go to the finals. They've been hanging around the Western Conference or the finals, one of those three teams the last few seasons. One of them is going to make it. Right now, OKC is the 1 seed, Denver's the 4 seed, Minnesota's the 6 seed, so it's looking like Denver, OKC in the second round. Don't tell me what the season series was because it doesn't matter. Both these teams have maintained their core for several years. They've both been deep in the playoffs. They're not going to show each other anything in the regular season. So don't point to any of these regular season games as any kind of indicator of what's going to happen in a playoff series. If either of these coaching staffs can withhold something that helps catch their opponent off guard and gives them the upper hand in just a single half of one of these games in a playoff series, that's worth it to them. They don't care if they lose games to that team in the regular season. They don't care what seed they are. I know it's great to get home court advantage as the first seed. Teams would love to have that. Teams try to have great records so that the players on their teams can have a higher chance of winning awards like MVP. But when it comes to being any kind of indicator of what's going to happen in the playoffs, all of these teams know that it doesn't matter what seed they are, it doesn't matter what games they won or lost during the regular season. Denver had a change in one of their starters. Cam Johnson slid right into an established role. He's fit extremely well. There are other guys that they brought on board, Valanciunas, Tim Hardaway Jr. These guys are veterans. They fit right in. Denver's ready. Minnesota, they acquire Ayo Dosunmu. They've had a couple of months to get him up to speed. He's just a weapon for them off the bench, gives them depth, and allows them to deploy him against particularly tough matchups. Their guard depth was a problem, and they addressed it. Both these teams know exactly who they are. They didn't need the regular season to tell them that. Look at the Lakers. They had an amazing March. I think they've lost 2 games since the beginning of March. It means nothing. They could win every remaining game. Their roster construction is average, and they're going to lose in the first round. Nothing they show during the regular season changes that reality. I think highly of JJ Redick as a coach. I saw what he did in the series against Minnesota last year. He did everything he could to hide his team's weaknesses. And you saw that he tried to keep his rotation as tight as possible. Jackson Hayes barely saw the floor. Gabe Vincent barely saw the floor. He had too many liabilities on that roster and ended up playing his starting 5 for an enormous amount of minutes because his team was drowning. He had too many holes. The Lakers didn't address those problems this offseason. They've got a year of continuity compared to last season, so that helps. They've got some pieces they've added, but ultimately they don't have enough two-way players, and so whatever lineups JJ puts out there, there's weaknesses to exploit. And you're not going to beat Minnesota, San Antonio, Denver, OKC. You might get by Houston if they somehow meet in the first round, but you're not beating one of those other teams. Let's talk about San Antonio. They've won 11 in a row. They may even catch OKC for the 1 seed. Wemby is looking like an MVP favorite. They're going to lose in the second round. Could they get out of the second round? Sure. But history has told us they're not winning in the second round, that they're not beating OKC, Denver, or Minnesota. We've never seen them in the playoffs before. They're going to go from a team who never made the playoffs to Western Conference Final. That happens every once in a while. They may be the exception, but I'm not going to bet on the exception happening. We've seen over and over throughout history, teams engage in this uphill climb on their way to title contender status. And usually it's going from a non-playoff team to a playoff team, then to a deep playoff run. And so we're just a year early on San Antonio. They'll be there next year, but they need to get bounced by one of these veteran teams here this season. They're going to feel the sting of having weaknesses in their roster and their coaching exposed. Mitch Johnson's never coached in a playoff series. I'm not picking them to beat a seasoned contender that's been in the mix for multiple years on their way to a finals run. I don't see it. I don't see first-timers having that kind of playoff success. In fact, Minnesota's dropped a few games recently, and Houston caught them for the 5 seed. Minnesota now sits in the 6 seed. Looking at the Lakers in round 1 as the 3 seed and San Antonio in round 2 as the 2 seed, that is a beautiful path for Minnesota. I think we're looking at another conference finals for Minnesota if things stay steady. Whereas OKC is looking at Denver in round 2. That's brutal. And here's why I think the regular season ultimately doesn't tell us anything about what to expect in the playoffs. They test totally different things, and really it comes down to adjustments. The regular season is about playing consistently great basketball, showing up every night, having depth to overcome injuries and slumps in play. The playoffs is about weaknesses and adjustments. In the regular season, you're going from night to night playing different teams. You're not game planning to the degree that you do in a playoff series, and you don't have the opportunity to adjust in between games like you do in a playoff series. In the playoffs, a coaching staff is 100% dedicated to exposing your weaknesses and exploiting them. And they have time between games to make adjustments in order to better exploit you. And so ultimately what a playoff series proves is who can outlast the other, who has strengths that cannot be stopped by the other team. Those are 2 fundamentally different approaches to the games. And so don't tell me what the results were of regular season games. And that's the key there. The performance of the players themselves is important in the regular season. We're seeing what they can do and can't do. But who won the game doesn't matter. And that's a reality that the NBA knows. They're trying to put in as much as they can to make it seem like the regular season games matter more. But these teams know, these veteran teams that have been playoff contenders for years, they know they're not going to be in the play-in picture. They're going to be in the top 6. That's all they care about. The regular season is like a roller coaster. The ups and downs, the twists and turns, it's all fun. But ultimately, we all know where this is going. So it's important to remember as you see teams catch fire in the regular season or players that look really great, we won't know if any of it's real until the playoffs, because the test teams and players face in the playoffs is fundamentally different. Nothing is real until we see it in the playoffs. Game planning to stop you is not there in the regular season. But come playoff time, your exposure is total. If you have holes in your game, they will be exposed. There's nowhere to hide. And so the teams that know themselves, they treat the regular season accordingly. They tread water, they experiment, they engage in smoke screening, they're trying to stay healthy, they're trying to identify some of their own vulnerabilities so that they can know what to expect from their opponent. I think a lot of the game planning they engage in is actually putting themselves in their opponent's shoes and saying, how would I attack me, so that you can attempt to counter that preemptively. Throughout the regular season, they're just turning over stones just to see what they find. Hey, we can get this out of this player. Oh, if we find ourselves in this position in a playoff series, we think we can trust this guy for some minutes. Those kinds of cards in their hand. We've talked about the West. Let's talk about the East for a minute. Boston is going to make the finals. I'm very confident in that. They have a championship core with continuity. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. They have coaching that is clearly very aligned with that group and with the team as a whole in Joe Mazzulla. You can tell when you watch their games that they are a tight group. They all play hard. They're all rowing in the same direction. You can see it just watching the games. That team is going to be difficult to beat in a 7-game series, and the rest of these teams in the East just don't seem as solid to me to bet on them overcoming a group that really has their act together in Boston. That said, Boston's not going to beat the Western Conference champion. And that's because the rest of their roster after Peyton Pritchard is still unproven. It's hard for me to pick them. Doesn't mean they can't win, but we haven't seen the rest of this roster with this team. The back end of their roster is relatively new. A guy like Vucevic was an excellent acquisition, could be a difference maker, gives them a skill set that they didn't have at the center position, gives Joe Mazzulla more cards to play. But we don't know what we're going to get out of him. So Boston, I expect to be strong enough to make the finals. That's where it ends, but they're going to be a force to be reckoned with next season. Once the back end of their rotation has this deep run playoff experience, they bring the whole group back. They're going to be tough to beat. Detroit's going to be there after losing this year. I think they'll lose in the Eastern Conference Finals to Boston. They're going to be back with a vengeance. The Knicks, they look underwhelming to me. They made the Eastern Conference Finals and then changed their coach. Don't like it. Took a step back in continuity, expecting to take a step forward on the floor. We haven't seen it. That's the risk you run when you make a move like that. Cleveland acquired James Harden, now basically driving the bus for that team. That's still too new of a situation for me to bet on. Cleveland's been underwhelming in the playoffs the last couple of years. That situation looks uncertain to me. So that's why Boston seems to have a clear path as far as I'm concerned. They check all the boxes for a veteran group with continuity and smart coaching that is hard to beat in a 7-game series. We see it with Miami a lot with Eric Spoelstra and his group. They fit that bill, at least they have in the past few seasons. Their talent has fallen off in recent years. But they won series against teams they had no business winning series against, because a 7-game series is not just a measure of how talented your team is. It's about coaching, and it's about the resilience of your group. So enjoy the last few games of the regular season. We'll be back when seeding is set to log our predictions and also to grade the over-unders that I did with Cake before the season. But what we won't do is get distracted by the noise that has happened during the regular season when making those predictions. We're not going to look at the season series. We're not going to look at how well the team has played in the last 10, 20 games. Doesn't matter. All that matters is coaching and the structural realities of these rosters. What are they missing? What do they have? What do they not have? What options do coaches have in their game planning? That's what dictates the cards in their hand come playoff time. Coaching, strength of the roster, everything else is theater.